Hi guys, so Polish MEP Radosław Sikorski appeared on the BBC Newsnight programme where he laid out the cold hard facts about how Europe, both the EU and the UK included, are in no position to withstand a potential Russian onslaught. While we in Europe have access to advanced weapon systems and technologies, traditional military hardware is severely lacking. Here Sikorski explained how Russia would basically wipe the floor with Europe based on tanks alone.
Well, I just like to back up the argument of the last gentleman because most people don't realize how far the West has disarmed in the last couple of decades. Let me give you just one piece of statistic. Germany has 250 tanks. France has 240 tanks. Britain has 200 tanks. Russia, I double-checked because I couldn't believe it, has 13,000 tanks, of which about 3,500 are quite modern. We have to stop consuming the peace dividend because peace is over.
But Radek, at the moment, no one is suggesting, even with all the tanks in the world, that the West would go into Ukraine or that would actually fight Russia. Or is that something that you want to be held in reserve as a real possibility?
No, of course not. But to be credible in deterring President Putin, you have to have a counterforce.
I think he makes a valid point here. I'm a pacifist, but I think he makes a valid point. Following the end of the Cold War, at the beginning of the 1990s, I think what happened in Europe was that we scaled down. Now, you can think that you can say that was a good idea or a bad idea. But it has left us exposed. And I'm including the UK here. The UK also scaled down its military. Europe scaled down its militaries as well. And what we've done instead is relied on the United States instead, through NATO. And I don't think that's viable for the future. Now, if we look at the US versus the Russia, they're completely different militaries. For example, here the US defense budget in 2020 was $715 billion compared to Russia's $62 billion. The United States has almost 1.4 million active personnel. Russia has 900,000. Just looking at battle tanks, main battle tanks, Russia has almost 3,000. The US has about 2,600. Artillery, Russia has 4,800. The US has 5,000. Now, he mentioned 13,000 tanks. I think a lot of those are out of date. A lot of them are Soviet era tanks. They're not really up to scratch and they can be taken out pretty easily. But they are still huge numbers. And a lot of them can probably could be thrown into a fight. I'm not an advocate for spending money on the military, but going forward, I think Europe really truly needs to start thinking about an EU army. I know Brexiteers were holding it out as a threat. You know, we need to leave the European Union because Europe may form an EU army. But at this stage, and looking back at what's happened over the last number of months, and even looking at Russian aggression over the last decade, I think the argument for an EU army is getting stronger and stronger. And we can't just rely on NATO. We can't just rely on the United States because, you know, Donald Trump is not a reliable actor. Joe Biden is more reliable, but who's going to be the next president? Can we rely on that person to say, yes, we're going to make sure that the United States is backing NATO if European countries are attacked? We can't rely on NATO. We have to rely on ourselves. And in order to do that, we would need to invest in a military. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think about all of this. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.